Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Breath of Hope, Chapter 2, Found, Part 1. In the forest outside the city, two elves crouched on a long branch, looking at the distant castle. They'll be on the lookout for us now, Ryan grumbled. 5 of us won't be enough, one of the assassins replied, a slight doubt in his eyes. We need all 6. Ryan glanced at him. We'll be stronger as 5. Below them, the remaining 4 sat, sharpening and inspecting weapons. However, it was clear they were isolating themselves from the youngest, who sat on the ground looking at her blades. She glanced over at one of her fellow moon shadows. Hey, can I borrow your sharpener thingy? Whetstone, the other replied gruffly. Yeah, that. No. Rayla turned away from them, knowing her actions had caused more harm than good. Eventually, Ruran and the other elf returned from the treetops and landed near the young elf. His eyes still filled with hurt and betrayal. Come with me, he ordered sternly, leaving no room to argue as he walked off. She followed him, head down. Once far enough away from the others, Ruran released a small breath. However, his hands still remained clenched into fists. I thought you could do it, Rayla. But I was wrong. You're not wrong. I can do it. I know you've never taken before. I brought you because you're talented. Maybe the fastest and strongest of any of us. But it takes more than that. There's an instinct, a moment of truth. He stopped and turned to face her. And in that moment, you hesitate. I won't hesitate again, she retorted, trying to stay determined. You will. I see now that you're still a child. Your heart isn't hard enough to do whatever it takes. I messed up. I know I did. Because I let that human go, we're all in danger. But that's why you have to let me make it right again. No, it's too late for that. I bound myself, she snapped, reaching for her blades. My heart for... The leader grabbed her before she could draw them. You will be unbound when the job is done. Your role now is to stay out of the way. He forced her to sit on a rock near them. You will wait here, quietly. If we are not back by sunrise, go home. Defeated, Rayla lowered her head and sat, glancing up at the distant castle above. Gradually, her determination was restored. Now she stood alone. I can fix this. She ran off towards the fortress, climbing the trees for cover. She eventually made it past the patrol of guards to the river. The elf jumped across the rocks and used her curved blades as hooks to climb up the cliff face to reach the very top of the castle wall. The long, never-ending climb was exhausting, so when she finally made it to the top, she pulled herself over and laid on her back. After getting her breath back, she forced herself to her feet and looked out to the forest where the others would be waiting. "You're wrong about me. I can do this. I will do this," she swore to herself before pulling her hood up and running into the palace via the tower. Carefully maneuvering through the palace, she found herself in a tower full of books and scrolls. As she looked around for some clue as to where she needed to go, she spied a young boy pulling at a painting and stepping out from behind with a glowing yellow and green toad. "Wow, Bait, I knew that tunnel would lead somewhere cool," he laughed before spotting her and freezing in his tracks. He stared at her, then held out a treat in his hand. "Jelly tart?" No thanks," she declined, drawing her blades from behind her back and pointed them at him. "Listen, I'm looking for Prince Ezran." "Why? What do you want with me?" "If you keep still, you'll find out soon enough," she answered, taking a step and preparing herself. "Oh," he said innocently, holding the toad out to her in his arms. "Have you met Bait? Say hello to my little friend." At which moment, Bait began to glow incredibly bright, blinding the elf and giving the boy a chance to flee back down the tunnel he just left, making sure to quickly pull the painting closed behind him. Below, the tunnel was lit by luminescent blue crystals. The young boy dropped his toad so he could run faster. The glowing creature kept a steady pace beside him. Finally, the pair came to a stone wall, and Ezran quickly began pressing the rocks and stones before him. Suddenly, a staircase began to appear in the floor, and he ran down the steps to find a hidden room. He pulled a lever on the wall, and the stairs began to retract. Bait croaked at his side as he watched the stairs go back to the ceiling, but the prince merely smiled at him. "Don't worry, Bait. It took me over a month to figure out that combination. We'll be safe in here," Ezran explained as he began to look around somewhere safe to hide and wait out the attacker. However, a moment later, the stairs began to lower once more, and the white-haired assassin stepped down. Her weapons were still at the ready. "Wait, how did you—" "I just pressed all the stones with jelly handprints," she replied with a slight smirk before beginning to walk towards the boy, but couldn't help looking at the room she found herself in. All the remains in the surrounding jars were quite disturbing. "What is this place? Rand is right. There's nothing in humans worth sparing." She tensed, ready to kill. "Time's up. Humans killed the Dragon Prince. There must be justice." Ezran was absolutely terrified, ran to hide behind the nearby cluttered desk. But Rayla leapt over it and held Ezran at the edge of her blade. "Just close your eyes and it'll be over soon," she said, trying to give the small boy at least some sort of comfort. He knew he was helpless against her, so he simply followed her advice. Ezran closed his eyes, clenched his toad friend close, and waited for it to be over. As she raised her blade to end him, there was a sound of chains from behind and a voice. Who are you?" Worried the new voice was a threat, Rayla turned around and saw a shape at the very back of the room, hidden in the shadows. It was looking at her. "Who?" the voice repeated, but trailed off weakly. The elf looked between the still cowering boy and the dark shape, choosing to step closer to the shadows. Her eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness as she approached. Ezran, despite being with someone who had just tried to murder him, followed her towards the voice. "Who are you?" Slowly the form came into view for them both. It was a teenage boy with horns like an elf, pale skin covered with thick scales. Bat-like wings sprouted from his back, and a thick, long tail was curled around his feet. His eyes were forest green, slitted like snakes, and he was bound at both wrists and ankles. There was enough room for movement, but not nearly enough to sit or lie down, stuck forever on his feet. He looked so weak they doubted he could move even if he wanted to. His clothes were rags, his pants only just covered, and his shirt was full of holes, some of which looked like burn marks. The human looked up at him, and he felt his heart breaking. Ignoring the assassin, who was still in a state of shock, the little prince walked over to him. "Poor guy," he said softly. The draconic boy looked away, scared of the child half his size. "Hey, I'm not going to hurt you," Ezran smiled gently, glancing at his ribs on the show. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a half-mush treat. "Here, you want a jelly tart?" The other boy sniffed the air, and the smell made his mouth water. "Jelly tart?" he questioned, having never heard of it before. "Yeah, you eat 'em. They're so good. Bade and I love 'em." Sniffing it again, he slowly reached towards it. His hand hesitated constantly, like it was a trick or a hallucination, but he eventually took hold of it. Once he felt the real pastry in his grip, he pulled it to his lips, taking a small bite of the corner. Instantly, he felt better. Sugar, fruit, or whatever was in this was making him feel better. Or maybe it was the boy's kindness. He felt his lip curl upward, revealing a sharp-looking canine. "Jelly tart," he repeated, and took another large bite. Ezran smiled and pulled out a tart for himself, eating as well. "See, they're good, right?" The winged boy nodded. "Good." Behind them, Rayla finally shook herself from shock. "This is a miracle. Everyone thought you were dead."